The content shared in this podcast reflects personal experiences and spiritual perspectives. It isn't intended as medical, psychological, or professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to explore ideas with discernment and seek guidance from qualified professionals when needed. Welcome to Mystican Identity, where we discover the unity in every tradition. I'm your host, the Mystic. Let's journey inward and remember what we've always known. Well, greetings. I'm just going to jump right into it. I've been dancing around talking about my knowing since I started this due to the fact that I've kind of been afraid of getting right down to it. So I've been dancing around a bunch of things, and I've been doing shorts on YouTube, using other people's material and quotes, and I feel like I've been regurgitating books and podcasts that I've digested, and I'm starting to feel that maybe I'm leaving people with this feeling of, so what exactly does this person believe or follow? I guess there's the other part of me that's just kind of has that little bit of fear that people are going to be like, this guy's nuts. But I got looking around recently, and our world now, due to the internet, is full of people sharing their opinions on their beliefs and whatever it is that they're into. So I just figured, hey, it's time that we just kind of get rid of that fear, put it behind us, and throw our hat into the ring. And I guess also in getting down to this, and really laying down what it is that I believe and what it is that I'm trying to talk about, really will free me up for other topics that I want to talk about as well. I guess what I'm really getting down to is, metaphorically, I've been trying to build a house without a solid foundation on a bed of sand. Kind of starting to understand what that metaphor is all about. Before I get started, though, please remember that I want people to continue believing what you believe. I don't attempt to convert or get somebody to trade teams, so to speak. We live in an era where people are able to share who they are with others in a much bigger way. And this is just me sharing what makes me a seeker on a journey and walking on a path to spiritual liberation. And of course, I have the hopes that if this harmonizes with you, well, it's my wish to be a voice that is much like a song you're into right now and just enjoy listening to. And to make this something easier to digest, I'm going to do my best to just keep this in first person in an effort to not appear as if I'm pointing fingers with how I go about describing this. And as I was putting this together, actually an example came to me of why I'm trying to do this in first person. And I don't know if this is an experience that other people have shared, but I know that this has happened to me more than once. And this particular scenario played out in my mind. It involves a coworker from years ago. And this coworker needed to talk to me about like an interaction they had with another coworker. And they just needed to get things out, using me as like a sounding board kind of an idea. At the time, I smoked cigarettes, so we went for a smoke break. And we're outside having a smoke while there was, people walking around. And there was this little bistro off to the side where people were having whatever they got, their coffee and stuff. And my coworker started telling me the story of this person that we both work with, and started getting into the details about this interaction that they had. As I started telling this story, this person got more lost in recreating the emotion of how this interaction impacted them. And I essentially started to become an avatar of the person as an outlet for this person to say the things to me that they wished they had said to the other person in much the same way they wished they would have said it to that person, but to me, if this starts to make sense. So in a sense, I became like this pillow that somebody was punching to get out the frustration of the person who is suffering, and they're using the pillow to punch as a way of them expressing their feelings about the other individual they were arguing with. I really hope I'm not losing anybody on this. Essentially, what happened was that in trying to describe what happened with this other person, the conversation got directed at me, and it turned into this person saying, "And you're going to tell me that I'm not qualified to do such and such? Who do you think you are?" And things moved on like that. It kept, "You can't tell me what to do. You don't know what I'm capable of." And that's how it turned out. Now, to me, I understood where the conversation was going. I was very open to the fact that this person needed to get some frustrations out. But to the people at the bistro and the people walking around, it seemed like I was the person that caused this pain and I was getting what I deserved. So if anyone's been in one of these situations where now you're surrounded and you're looking going, I really hope these people aren't thinking that this is me getting yelled at for something I did. That's what I'm trying to avoid by keeping this introduction into my beliefs by talking about it in the first person. So like I said, that's what I want to avoid doing. I may slip because sometimes I can get into that same kind of animation. But if I slip, I'll try to circle back to one-pointedness and bring this back to one person, myself. What I love about this knowing is that I'm part of a team of mystics of the past who had similar experiences and documented them the best way they knew how. From such documentation and storytelling and experiences, we got such gifts as the books of the Bible, the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Buddhism, and so on and so on and so on. All of these accounts are puzzle pieces that all come together to coordinate a message of good news for those who are spiritual seekers. So let's roll up the sleeves, get the hands warm, get into a storytelling mode, and let's get into this. So many, many years ago, and when I say many, I'm talking billions of years ago, there was and still is a place that is not a place. It's a plane of existence. I put was because at one point, that's all there was. This place is free of suffering. It's pure bliss, formless. One may compare it to a dream, or dreams may be a breadcrumb leading back to it, but we'll hit on that later. But one might compare this plane of existence to what dreams are like. No pain, no suffering, no arguments, no jealousy, no acceptance. Here's an interesting one. It's a really fun one to look at because that sounds terrible. It sounds kind of terrifying. No acceptance. Well, yes. Reason being is because there is only suchness or isness. There are no differences to accept because of the main aspect of this place, which is unity. Easiest way to perceive this is by looking at a fundamental truth of our current plane of existence. And if you understand this fully, you got it. That is, for every inside, there is an outside, and for every outside, there is an inside. That's it. The quote, pre-this, unquote, point of existence I'm talking about was a plane of existence where there is no point. It just is. It's just it. So let's look at this plane from a point of view of someone who's just had a mystical experience in the past and was so impressed by this knowing that they had to write it down. I would have to establish some kind of this versus that comparison in order to understand that in comparison to this. In the past, a great example would be, let's say a kingdom. That's where all the groovy stuff is. Anyone in this kingdom has access to the best food, the best physicians, the best musicians. It's cleaner. That's a plus. Out here on this side of the kingdom walls is me. I struggle with the elements. I don't get my food brought to me. There's suffering and disease and discontentment. If only I lived on the other side of the walls in the kingdom where there's bliss. So for my example of this one state of existence where there was and is lack of suffering, we'll just call that the kingdom of bliss. Sounds good. So I was part of this kingdom, and so were many, many others. And remember, this was billions of years ago. And this is where things are going to get fun, okay? This vast sea of others and I, well, our consciousness all were part of a greater whole. A mystic would have attempted to relate this in a storyteller fashion by saying that our consciousness collectively came together under an umbrella, or better yet, a tribe. A tribe of one name. Let's just call that tribe the Divine. The tribe of the Divine. I dig it. That's cool. Or better yet, as if our consciousness are children of the Divine. The Divine is like our Father, and we are like its children because we collectively have spiritual DNA that is shared with the Divine. I like this way of describing it because that means all these other consciousnesses are brothers and sisters in the Divine. One could even personify this as if I'm part of the Divine and the Divine is part of me. Sounds pretty groovy up to this point, yes? So, what happened? Now, I know I'm not in that place anymore. I experience suffering. I experience pain. I experience sadness. And if every inside has an outside and every outside has an inside, then the only way for me to understand this kingdom of bliss is because I have a method of comparison. And if there was once a plane of existence where there wasn't a comparison, an event must have occurred that created a wall or method of separateness between the kingdom and not kingdom. Essentially. Essentially, for that kingdom to become distinct, an anti-kingdom had to be established or come into being. Yes? This means a split or division would have to occur to create this distinction. Why? Well, at some point, no matter how much we cut something into pieces, we eventually get to a point where it has its absoluteness. One might say you eventually get to nothingness, yes, but to understand nothingness, one has to understand somethingness. So it has to go deeper than that. The element which defines it as not that. A mystic may write this as a point where the one can't look at the other, or doesn't recognize the other because it is so entirely pure this, it can't be any part of that. Best example I can really come up with really quick is magnets. If you've ever played with magnets, there is this fundamental point where the one magnet absolutely rejects or repels the other magnet. Mystical writing may describe this as, a kingdom divided amongst itself cannot stand. Yes, that is where this split between divine and anti-divine occurred. And if the divine in the tribe of the children of the divine, for every inside there is an outside, the anti-divine of the anti-kingdom thus has to be the name of the tribe of something or some things. This is where I and many others become actors in this cosmic drama. So this is where I pause and step out of the story just for a touch, just to insert a little old disclaimer. I don't remember these things happening. They aren't things that I recall. They're just revelations, I suppose, that I've had through meditation and reading and following guidance from different beliefs. So, back to our story. So I and many others developed an arrogance. I actually prefer defiance, and I'll come back to that time and time again. It was a complete ungratefulness for our unity with the divine and a desire to separate us from the divine, which was to create the first distinction between this and that. There are so many of us that rose up that one might describe the event as a legion of us formed a unity of our own, an anti-tribe of our own that proudly stated we were going to build our own kingdom. Let's call it the anti-kingdom that would be so much better than the divines that a mystic might describe it as aspiring to ascend above the heights, so high that we would be just as great as the divine, but in our own image. Another way a mystic might write this, depending on the era and culture of the mystic, would be maybe in a story describing that a son who had everything within his father's estate, and I mean everything, never wanted of anything. And this son just comes up to his father one day and says, "I hate you. I can't stand you." And you can enter in your own expletives here if it gives it a little bit more presence. But I can't stand you. I hate this place. I hate your crappy stuff. This unity stuff of yours sucks. I want to go out on my own and do my own thing. So give me what I deserve right now because I want nothing to do with you anymore. I defy you. And I want you to give me whatever I need because I'm better off on my own. Now give me my stuff. My stuff. I'll come back to that time and time again too. Right about now, all of this should start sounding a little bit familiar, and it should. But wow, that's heavy. Isn't it? Like that's thick and dense. Let's just let that sink in for a second. Father who's given absolutely everything can't imagine of giving any more so that the son has want of nothing. For absolutely some unknown reason, this outburst happens. That level of arrogance and defiance. And if I let that steep in for a bit, it's just too heavy. My chest starts to feel heavy. My breathing changes. It becomes almost kind of difficult when I really let myself sit in that. I feel panic, discomfort, unsettled, a state of unrest and agitation. To be honest, it's really shameful behavior. But there it is. There it is. So, what does the divine do? Or what did the divine do? Well, the divine let it happen. After all, a kingdom divided amongst itself cannot stand. This is the first time that it introduced sadness into the divine, a part of it that was leaving and promising to never return. Now, I've lost wonderful beings along my life journey. In fact, a very dear one moved on from this plane almost a year ago, and I still feel so incomplete. I still long for its companionship and presence. As I go along, I'll start describing how our plane is filled with examples of things and relationships to lead back to the divine, like breadcrumbs, as I mentioned before, occurrences and relationships leading back home. And when I mention the breadcrumbs and leading back home, that's because the divine still considers me part of the family and wants me to come back home. Here's the groovy part. It's really far out. Really super cool. You see, the divine agreed to my separation and the rest of the legion of anti-divines. And it instructed, it said, so if you go your own way, I'll always have a place for you if you choose to come back home. In fact, I'll even get you started by building a place for you. You wanted stuff, so I'll give you some stuff. There's a bit of a danger to this, though, that I need to warn you of. And that is, if you get too enamored with the stuff, you may buy into the lie that that is what you truly are and that you will be satisfied with it always. If you get too attached to the stuff, you'll soon forget the divine and your way back home. You'll find yourself trapped in a cycle of suffering. If you buy into the lie of the awareness of separation, you'll get lost in the stuff and forget the divine, your true self, where you truly come from. Don't buy into the distractions. And so the end of this beginning of my story is that I went on my way. I went on my way. I went on my arrogant way. I went on my defiant way. Billions of years ago, along with many others, a legion of fallen children of the tribe of the anti-divine to our anti-kingdom. You can replace those with famous labels that we're all used to, where formlessness became form. Billions of years ago, living cycle after cycle, and each time I complete a cycle, the trick is to carry the memory into the next cycle until I eventually realize that the stuff got me nowhere except more suffering, and I was better off back home with the divine. And it's time to start my journey, my path, my real self rediscovery, to follow the breadcrumbs I was talking about back. And the beginning of my journey is to recognize my defiance. Now, here's the part. This is, even though I was raised in a spiritual way, I was raised in Christianity and I knew the whole thing about forgiveness. Once I realized this in my defiance, and I made this more about my experience, I realized that it was my choice. I wasn't cast out. I opted for it through my defiance. And when I saw that defiance, I literally, for the first time ever, wept. That's how apologetic I felt. That's how much of a dumpster I felt like, that I was that defiant against the divine. And that's why I say, for me, from my experience, it wasn't enough to just ask for forgiveness for my defiance, but it became something I felt deeply, deep inside. It was a need for forgiveness. It was a need for forgiveness of that defiance and arrogance. And through methods like meditation, living consciously, increasing my connection with others of like-mindedness, ridding myself of ego and attachment, and seeking the guidance of the divine, where it's like listening to the instructions of how to navigate the path, I can start my walk back home. Along the way, it is my responsibility to demonstrate my awakening to others in the things that I do. And that's why in the Bible, it says, "By your deeds you shall know me." But also in the Bhagavad Gita, it says that you should do without expecting anything in return. My actions, very important, my actions should be such that I awaken others by what I do to something they've long forgotten. Cycle after cycle, I've been caught up in distractions and remained lost. But this time around, a bit of the source code, so to speak, actually, I really like that. A bit of the source code, that's cool. I'm going to keep that. This time, a bit of the source code woke me up, and I'm aware now that I must change the ratio of my clinging to the distractions to clinging to the divine as a guide toward liberation and eventually enlightenment. So I hope you enjoyed my backstory. There's more to come. But if this harmonized with you in any way and you want to hear more about it, please feel free to like, possibly subscribe or follow as I continue along a little bit more each time with my backstory and where it leads. My fellow seekers, I wish you and your loved ones all the best. Have a wonderful experience. Until next now.